What's up, IGN? My name is Jose Otero. I'm joined by Megan Sullivan.
Hey, guys.
And this morning, so overnight in Japan, was Level 5's Vision event, where they made a couple of big announcements.
Yes.
Yokai Watch getting a third game, which in the morning, Nintendo said there is a Yokai Watch game coming to the West.
Yes.
But then, more specifically to Level 5, that Fantasy Life 2 and the next big Layton game, Layton 7, which I thought they were done with Layton, by the way.
Yeah, I did too. I'm not sure where this came from, but okay.
Yeah, but are both coming to smartphone. They so far have not said a word about if these things will be coming to 3DS, and there aren't a lot of assets to kind of go with this stuff.
No, there's very few.
But you know, let's just talk a little bit about that. So first of all, let's begin with Fantasy Life, which the West finally got a piece of just this past fall.
Yes.
Had already been out in Japan. I mean, what were your impressions overall?
So I gave it an 8. I thought it was a great game. The story was a little sluggish and a little weird, but I really love the job aspect. I love it kind of combines like the job system of like Final Fantasy V and like the life sim of Rune Factory and Harvest Moon, and it really worked. So it was I don't know if it's a hugely popular game, but most people who played it really enjoyed it, and so we were all waiting for a sequel.
Then the sequel is on smartphone, but not to throw that under the bus, but then it also has a slightly different focus, right? Sort of village building, town building as well.
So they announced that it was actually going to be more of a sim game where you have town building in it, which is something that really wasn't in Fantasy Life, and yeah, so it's definitely going to be different. There is some concern. People are like, what does that mean? Does that mean microtransactions, or is it just a different way of playing? We don't really know. We don't have a lot of information about it yet, so it's kind of a wait-and-see approach at this point. But it's definitely different, that it's going to focus more on town building and life simulation even more.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you have Layton 7. So Layton, this is not the first time Professor Layton has been on your smartphone. In fact, it wasn't Layton, it was Layton Brothers, which was sort of a spin-off series. They put this thing out, I believe, late 2012 in Japan, 2013 in the US. It's on Android and iOS, and that one actually did have sort of a microtransaction focus, where there was sort of, you can get the first 2 cases and play them for free, but then to play the additional cases, you were paying $1.99 for a set, or $2.99 for a set.
Yeah, that's right.
But there were 2 separate sets. So it's really curious, though, to see Level 5, who, you know, these, at least 2 of these franchises, both of them were on 3DS, you know, sort of saying, hey, we're going to smartphone. I mean, why do we think that is? Like, why don't we come around to that?
Well, my theory is that in Japan, mobile video games, like anything on mobile, is very popular because everyone takes the train to work or everyone takes public transportation. It's just an easy way to get game time in while you're going, you know, to work. And it's popular in the US and it's popular in the West, but not as. So in Japan, it actually makes sense. But in the West, a lot of people were not really happy to hear things like Fantasy Life 2 is going to be out on mobiles. It's not a preferred platform to play games on. And especially if you have a 3DS and you were sort of expecting the next Fantasy Life to come out on the 3DS, you're a little bit disappointed that it's not, because the controls really worked, I thought, on the 3DS. Well, they really mapped out well.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if Level 5 just sees some big potential for both of these brands. I mean, with Layton, you have something that is very open for, you know, sort of a lot of different types of gamers. It's a lot of puzzle solving, a lot of riddles. And, you know, at this point, it's not, I don't think for them it was a move to sort of disparage or say, like, Nintendo's hardware wasn't good enough to handle these games, but more that there's a big opportunity for them to kind of take a brand like Professor Layton that on DS pretty much crushed and did really well because there were so many out in the world. I'd be curious to see how the Layton games on 3DS have fared versus those. I mean, being that it's a much smaller install base.
And that's not to say that it won't eventually come out. I mean, they could port it to 3DS, or they could port it to the Wii U or something like that later on. So it's definitely a possibility. So I am very curious to know how like the controls are going to work on the mobile devices.
Well, and on Level 5 too, it's definitely got to be how conscious are they that if these are going to start on mobile and then show up somewhere else, that they have to be pretty much tailored to mobile.
Yeah.
And once you tailor that far to mobile, is it worth going the next step and putting that on a dedicated handheld? But I do think with both brands, they have, you know, they definitely can see an opportunity there. There are so many iOS and Android devices in the world, you can't help but see what they're going for. But it's definitely a blow to Nintendo. On the flip side, though, they did get Yokai Watch out of them, and that's a big success in Japan right now.
It's a huge success.
It is coming here as well. Like that, it looks like that's going to continue to live on 3DS as an exclusive. So maybe that was part of that conversation, where it was like, hey, we want Yokai Watch to continue being a big deal for us. Whereas Level 5 looked at it and said, well, Layton and Fantasy Life, like, we like what these have done, but maybe putting them in other places can lead to big things.
I do. I totally agree with that, especially with Yokai Watch finally coming to the US and finally coming to the West and seeing how it does, because it's very much like Pokemon, but it's also very much its own thing.
Sure.
You know? So I'm very curious to know how that will do in the West.
Well, let us know what you think. Obviously, these two franchises are a big deal. The fact that they are coming to smartphone, the fact that they're not coming to 3DS. Let us know in the comments. And for more coverage on Level 5, Vision, Nintendo, anything under the sun that's related to gaming, keep it right here at IGN.